Ringo was always a lot more professional. He kept that stage name, and he always was a little bit different from the others because of it. It gave him, who knows, some je ne sais quoi. I don't even know if I'm using that word right. I don't know. But it gave Ringo something. I think most of us are familiar with the origin story for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where Paul McCartney mishears salt and pepper. He hears Sgt. Pepper. And he comes up with the idea for this concept album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, where the Beatles redefine themselves. They become a studio group and experiment in the studio, make this studio album. I think Paul was inspired by the Beach Boys when he came up with this idea, wanted to invent new sounds, new ways of recording music. And they did just that. They came up with this album that just changed history. Really worked for them. I don't think that they really thought of themselves as Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band so much. I mean, the Beatles are the ultimate supergroup, and they didn't have to come up with, aliases or alter egos, like the Traveling Wilburys did. But they had in the past come up with some aliases or stage names. John and Paul were the Nurk Twins in April of 1960 when they performed, I think it was a couple of nights at a pub. And then right after that, when they were touring as the Silver Beatles, they were touring with Johnny Gentle. And John was Long John Lennon, Paul was Paul Ramon, George was Carl Harrison, and Stuart Sutcliffe was Stuart DeStael. And they only kept those names for a few months, and then they changed to the Beatles forever. They became the Beatles, and then they went to Hamburg. And then in Hamburg, they met Ringo Starr, who already had this stage name in place. I mean, he was Ringo. He was already Ringo. He was already very professional and had that name for a while, and the Beatles thought Ringo was a pro. And that name Ringo really works for him. Ringo really didn't necessarily need an alias or an alter ego because, he was Ringo. But on Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Paul gave him this alias or this pseudonym, whatever you want to call him. He was Billy Shears in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. So I just was thinking, okay, like in the Wilburys, the Traveling Wilburys, they were brothers and they all had that last name Wilbury. Well, what if just by chance they had decided to be brothers? Okay, I'm just making stuff up here. This is Rosie, from Rosie's studio, and she can play around with names all she wants here. So, okay, we've already got Ringo as Billy Shears, so they're all brothers. So what could John be? And, I'm not the best at all of this, but, going along the lines of John really liking the name John, and also he probably looked up to Chuck Berry at this time. This is 1967. Maybe John would like the name Johnny B. Shears. Maybe. Or maybe it could be something else like what did he like? John used Dr. Winston O'Boogie in the 70s, so he could even choose Johnny B. O'Shears. Being a little bit different, just being John. It could be anything. John could have been anything. Lewis Carroll Shears, or just Carol Lewis Shears. Who knows what John would have come up with? So I just came up with something boring, Johnny B. Shears. Paul probably himself would have come up with something romantic. I think he thought Paul Ramon was something mysterious and romantic, but I came up with something boring like Buddy Shears, like as in Buddy Holly, because they all admired Buddy Holly. And then George, because this was 1967, and George was into the sitar, and he admired Robbie Shankar, so he probably would have went with Robbie Shears. Maybe. These are just my guesses. I'm just playing around. And I was looking at the Sgt. Pepper's album, and who did I see on the cover of that album? I saw Bob Dylan. What if Bob Dylan was this like mysterious backup singer or something? What if Bob Dylan was on there? Maybe. What if Bob Dylan was there? What kind of a alter ego would Bob have come up with? I don't know. Probably like Dylan Shears. I don't know. Or Zimmy Shears. I don't know. So I'm not as creative. I'm not a wordsmith like any of these guys are, but I just think it's kind of weird. I'm just having fun. Again, this is Rosie and Rosie's studio coming up with this. Now, the Traveling Wilburys, now they had to. That's a supergroup. That actually is a supergroup. The Beatles were already a supergroup. They didn't need necessarily to be Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, but it was just an idea. It was just a concept. It was just a framework for them to kind of get them out of their heads, just kind of cosplay a little bit. But the Traveling Wilburys, they went the whole way, and they had to, because they were 5 different artists, and they were all had different labels. So they had to kind of release themselves a little bit from the labels, be somebody different. They became the Wilburys, and they came up with an actual backstory of themselves. They were the sons of Charles T. Wilbury. Derek Taylor came up with that backstory. And so that's why Tom Petty was Charlie T. Jr., and you had George was Nelson Wilbury, Jeff Lynne was Otis Wilbury, Roy Orbison was Lefty Wilbury, and Bob Dylan was Lucky Wilbury. So they all were, again, just who knows why they all came up with it. A couple of them were named after folks they admired. Some they just kind of chose out of nowhere. And again, it doesn't really matter. They're all just making stuff up, And when you're play acting, when you're cosplaying, it just doesn't matter. You can just be whoever you want to be, and it just gives you that freedom. And in this case, the freedom away from the record labels. They came up with their own record label, and they created something really special here. This supergroup, the Traveling Wilburys. Now, the Beatles are the ultimate supergroup. The Wilburys a supergroup too. But I just think that these alter egos, can be very empowering. And sometimes you have to use them for, I guess, so you can actually be paid money to give you that recording freedom. And I think that John Lennon did that. He was like Dr. Winston O'Boogie. Paul did that a few times. I think that it was Bernard Webb. He used that pseudonym, and George Harrison used different. Was it Angelo Mysterioso? So these aliases, these alter egos come in handy. They just kind of keep them in their pocket, keep them out when necessary. It gives the artists a little bit of freedom, and they're no stranger to it. But I think a really cool time that they came up with an alter ego, when they were, as they were just kind of playing around in the studio. When this was during the recording of, and this is just my idea, my take on it. I'm not saying that they really were sticking to any kind of pseudonyms here or alter egos, but this is when they were recording the song, You Know My Name, Look Up the Number. And they were in Abbey Road, or EMI at the time. And John was singing, he was like, welcome to Slaggers, so Slaggers. So EMI became Slaggers. And Paul McCartney became Dennis O'Bell. So they're just playing around, having fun. And I got to tell you, I love that. I love that song. So when the Beatles, or maybe anybody, when they are freed of who they really are, they can just go outside of their comfort zone, experiment a little bit. Just, who knows, maybe make some mistakes, and maybe the mistakes become something amazing, something fabulous. And I'm sure that's exactly what happened, like with the Beatles when they created Sgt. Pepper. A lot of little magic things happened with that, and they just, let's leave it in, like the alarm clock. They had to leave it in. Okay, they couldn't get it out, so they leave it in, and it works out perfect. It's the magic of those alter egos that let you, get away with stuff that maybe that Jackie couldn't. Rosie can do stuff that Jackie can't. So it all works out great. It's the magic of those alter egos. It works for them. Thanks so much for being here with me. I really appreciate it. And until next time, peace and love one another. Take care. You could go like Willie-nilly Shears. You could go with Johnny Mary Jane Shears. I just think he likes the name John, so I want to give him John. Okay, in his alter ego, it could be anything with John, because that's just John.